Hello and welcome to another episode of TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group, and we are in election season, so we do things a little bit differently. We're not running the news, we're going right to interviews. We want to give as much time as possible to candidates in townwide races. The election, of course, is Tuesday, May 6th. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And in addition to voting for town meeting members in each of the 17 precincts in town, we have town-wide officials up for office in competitive races. Those competitive races include select board, school committee, and library trustee. Because we've got so many races, I can't even get them all on television. So we've got all of the library trustees that will be made available on Zoom, and you can watch them off the internets. The select board and the school committee, we have both on television and on Zoom. And today we are very lucky that we have select board candidate Carlos Ridruejo. Carlos, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tommy, and thank you for this opportunity. Happy to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And, we get right into it. We want to get to know you better. And so the question I ask everyone is, what have you been doing your whole life? How'd you get to this point?
That's a good question. So I grew up in Spain, and I until I was 17, and then I decided to come to the U.S. To study. And my whole family is still in Spain, but I went to college, studied architecture, then I did my master's here in Boston, MIT, and um, and then I met my wife through some work friends. And we were looking for a place to live. I had lived in the Back Bay, and I lived in Cambridge for a little bit. And we found Brookline. So 20 years ago, actually, I can't believe it's 20 years already, but 20 years ago, we moved to Brookline. We lived at the Brook House for a while. And then when our son was born, he's 13 now, he's going to Runkle. We decided to make Brookline our home, and so it wasn't until 2016 that I was watching one of the GOP debates, and I thought, well, one of these people are going to get elected, and my green card is probably not good enough. So I decided then to become a U.S. citizen. And it wasn't until I became a U.S. citizen that I could participate fully in the way that town meeting and town government works. Um, I discovered something I didn't know I had, which was sort of the civic duty, because in Europe, civic duty is a very abstract thing. Government does its own thing. They don't really ask a lot of questions of how to do it. But here, especially in Brookline, with the town meeting form of government, as someone told me, once the bug bites you for civic duty, it really gets to you. So as you know, I got appointed to the advisory committee, which was a lot of fun. And from that, I went to town meeting and then multiple committees. Most of them were had to do with my background with architecture, design, zoning, and actually a little bit of I was in a couple of the hiring groups for department heads. So it's been uh, it's been a fun ride, and so I think now it's the time for me to stop complaining about things and try to jump in and do something about it.
And so the viewers know the advisory committee is the town's finance committee, right? And so the people who serve on the advisory committee review every single proposed bylaw or warrant article, put together what is now something like a $400 million town and schools budget. The school committee, of course, gets the details on the schools, but the entire budget comes through the finance committee. And then has these other sort of odds and ends responsibilities, emergency spending, and these other things. It's quite a bit of work. And you paint actually you paint a picture of quite a bit of experience involved in town government. Select boards, a bit of a different kettle of fish. How do you see your experiences um, giving you additional skills or tools as a select board member?
Well, first I wanted to talk a little bit about the advisory committee because the advisory committee is a fantastic committee. I mean, it's 30 people. My wife always says, "How the hell do you guys get anything done?" And we experienced it both in person and then when we went into Zoom, and I remember the challenges. It's like, how is this going to work? Um, and it's 30 people that are both from the more progressive side of town to the more conservative side of town. And what's amazing about the group of people is that they all listen to each other. There's never bickering or any kind of that element in there. Um, people they say what they bring their experience, they say what they think about what we're discussing. A lot of times people change their minds because of what's mentioned in the discussion, and then they vote on everything. And as you said, it's from the budget to bylaw amendments or bylaw discussions. Um, there's little that I think gets discussed or that happens in town that doesn't get discussed in some way at the advisory committee, because you have the advisory committee and then you have the subcommittees. I was on the first sustainability committee. I was chair of that committee, and then I was also on the zoning and land use, which is now absorbed the sustainability subcommittee. So that deals with how the city, the town is shaped. Um, and and then I was also on the capital subcommittee, and that deals with how we spend our money shaping the town with for our own infrastructure. So you get to view things. You get to understand why what's happening is happening. You get to influence some of that, but you also get to know all the department heads very well. You get to know the employees, the different the staff, and that makes a big difference. And I think tying this to the select board, well, when you have that experience and you get elected to the select board, you basically hit the ground running. You don't have to learn about the budget. You don't have to learn about how the tax is based or annually because you've already been exposed to that for at least 3 or 4 years. You don't have to meet the staff and get to know the department, the commissioner of buildings or the DPW or others because you already know them and they already know you, and so they already know sort of what your approach is and what you're looking for. And so it's a much more efficient um, place to be from the very beginning. And I think that you only have 3 years, and as you know, well, you have 2 years, right? Um, so time is of the essence, and a lot of things take a while to get through. So the more time that you can save by knowing the processes that are you're subject to, I think the better it is.
I also want to talk about your experience as an architect and how that ties in. Clearly, land use, development, planning, it's always part of municipal government's experience. It has gotten more attention in the past several years, both locally and statewide, but importantly, locally. Um, how has how do you bring your architecture to um, development? And I'm thinking, on behalf of the town. And so I'm thinking, for example, the comprehensive plan, right? Um, what are your thoughts on it as a select board member? Do you have influence over it? What do you do with it? How does that tie together for you?
Well, so the comprehensive plan is, as you know, a very long process that has started. It's going to end this year, and what it needs. so I think we need to let it um, conclude what it should be. But then once it's concluded, we need to support it. And I think that's where the select board comes in because the select board doesn't necessarily influence it during the process, but it can be very helpful later to say, okay, well, this is what the comprehensive plan has recommended. How can we implement this in the next few years? Um, but other than the comprehensive plan, there is a lot of things. I mean, the reason why I was appointed to the advisory committee was actually for my architectural background. And I have architecture in both architecture and graphic design. The posters behind me are from the Head of the Charles. Those are my first posters that I designed about almost 30 years ago. Um, and so graphic design, architecture, it's all about our environment. It's all about how we feel in our environment. And I think it's important to see that design, there's an aspect of design, and then there's an aspect of sort of numbers and sort of making things happen. The same way that there's the legal aspect, which is the zoning. But in order to create, the way I see it is in order to create zoning, you have to first try to figure out what kind of space you want to be in physically, and then adapt that space, transform that space, or turn in that space into legalese, which is basically zoning. So that's always a challenge because people, especially in a town full of lawyers, people see zoning as something separate from the design. But I've been to a lot of zoning committees, for example, for the Balfour project up in the Fisher Hill, or a lot of the Boylston Street Committee, zoning committee, and now the Chestnut Hill West. And a lot of people say, well, what do we want to see here? And it's hard to, especially when a lot of times the consultants do diagrams where these big boxes with no detail on them. It's hard to see how big those boxes are. Once you start putting some sort of detail on them, you can see, oh, it's 4 story. It's not that bad. It's 5 stories, 4 stories. Um, and then if you also tell people, well, it's the same as this area in town, and how does that feel? Um, and I'm sorry if I'm sort of going all over the place on this one, but it's just a very abstract way of having to deal with design because you have to uh, think of what the future would look like without seeing it there. So you have to make sure that there's enough sunlight that there's a difference between building something high on the south side versus the north side because of the way the sun hits. The shadows, the setbacks, the materials, everything sort of makes a space more pleasant than others. We have plenty of examples in Boston where brutalist buildings were not quite that um, that pleasant, I guess.
So I wanna sort of drill down into, you mentioned Chestnut Hill West. Um, what viewers may not know that I know you appreciate is, the onesies, twosies, the small bits of development don't have a dramatic impact on the neighborhood, the way the town operates, or tax collections. But larger projects can generate enough new revenue to push off an override to help fill a budget gap. On the other hand, they could actually drive costs and could ultimately cost the rest of town tax money and trying to make it work. And so the details of the developments matter both for the neighborhood, but also for the town budget as a whole. Chestnut Hill West seems to be the next or the teed up substantial development, a development that town hall budget green visors would notice in doing their work, right? Is that going to happen? What's it going to look like? Where do you think it should go, and what role does the select board have in shaping those sorts of details?
So there's a lot there. Um, so there many other towns, well, let me start with commercial development. So, as you said, commercial development is taxed at a higher rate and it uses less of town services. So, for example, hotel is the best use in tax-wise because it's taxed commercially. It has home and meals taxes above that, and it doesn't use schools, etc. So that is a sort of best use we've been told for a property. Now, you can only place those in certain places. That makes sense. What Chestnut Hill West does is there's not a lot of currently there's not a lot of commercial opportunities in town. We have because everything is taken either by open space or by residential housing. Um, and there's just not big swaths of land, like, for example, Cambridge had with Kendall Square, or Watertown had with the Arsenal, or Somerville had with Assembly Square. We have very small lots or smaller lots that are interspersed between throughout the town. One of the largest lots is the Chestnut Hill, or largest areas is the Chestnut Hill West. Across the street from that is the Chestnut Hill Street, which is in Newton. Um, so there is an opportunity to create something that is more based on commercial development than in housing or residential development. Now, of course, now we have the challenge that we do need a lot of housing to sort of as our population is growing. The problem is if we do all housing, then we've lost an opportunity to do the commercial development that would lower or ease the taxes on the residential side of things. So we have to choose what to do. And if you, for example, there was a study done for Chestnut Hill West where each unit of housing would add about $1,100 of municipal expense to the operating um, budget. And if it had a student in the school system, it would add another $14,000 per student.
And these
So
units would generate what, 10 or $15,000 a year in additional property tax revenue.
right, because say, well, I mean, here is the sad part is that the more affordable the unit is, the less it generates. The less affordable it is, so the high-end condos generate a lot more, but that's not what we need. But so at the end, we end up having to pay. We have more expense than we have revenue. Um, so we have to make sure that we find opportunities where we can have more revenue than expense, and that's where the commercial opportunities come. Now, we also have to provide something or propose something that the developers are willing to build, and that's where, with the ever-changing market, that's where the challenge is right now. It used to be labs, maybe it's medical offices, whatever it may be. So it's not clear, but the select board can sort of push uh, the projects in those directions.
So I want to sort of dive into the budget a little bit. We teed it up. Um, there's been conversation about a gap, not a deficit, but a gap in what the schools were looking for versus what it looks like they will have available. And every year there's pressure on the budget because tax revenue can only grow by the so-called Prop 2.5 limit, but healthcare costs aren't limited by Prop 2.5, right? And so on and so forth. So there's been tension. As you know, Uh, the Pierce debt exclusion passed 51-49. There is an increased sentiment like, hey, we can't just keep raising taxes. The votes aren't going to pass. Uh, so where does that lead? Where do you sit on all of that? How will Brookline continue to, by law, maintain a balanced budget? Is it through tax increases? Is it through tightening the belt? Is it through development? What's the magic?
If we knew that, it would be easy. Um, well, I think it's a combination of many things. As you know, Tommy, I voted against Pierce. And the reason I voted against Pierce wasn't because Pierce didn't deserve a new school or didn't deserve an updated facility or any of that. I am very supportive of the schools. I have a kid in Runkle. The reason why I voted for Pierce was because I thought it was getting more of the overall bucket of money that we have, because I feel like there is a there's a bucket of money that the taxpayers are willing to pay over the next 10, 15 years. And we have to sort of ration that, how we use that bucket. If we use it too fast, then we get to the bottom and there's nothing left. So I felt that that project was taking a little bit too much of that bucket, and that then it would actually make possible overrides very hard to pass, especially right after the fact. And we also have another school, Baker School, which it's going to be renovated. And right now, no one wants to talk about it because of that, for that reason. So we we also have to think about 20% of our population is in schools, and another 20% is over 60. And the ones over 60, a lot of them are on fixed incomes. And how do you sort of balance the spending and the taxing on those people who don't have, they want to stay in town, but they don't have additional ways of, income. And we have to sort of stay affordable for them. So I think the the best solution is to try to be as frugal as possible with our budget, be as efficient as it is possible, because the worst thing that could happen is that we decide to spend more money, we go for the override, and then it fails. And as Pierce was very close. Um, and and then what do we do? And that's a little bit what happened with the schools. We had one-time money. We had ARPA money for 3 years. Um, the advisory committee always recommended that it wasn't that money should be used for one-time use, not for operating. It didn't quite happen that way. And after 3 years of having a position filled with one-time money, and then that money stops, what do you do? So it's it's not an easy, there's no easy solution. I think we just need to have more understanding of how to um, go at it.
So we've just got a couple of minutes left, and I do want to talk about leadership style. I think um, different different people have different ways of providing leadership. Of course, the select board is a group of five, so it's this aggregate. And there's leadership amongst the board, there's leadership amongst staff, there's leadership in town, right? Give us a sense for how you approach leadership, how you will, guide or otherwise get us from here to there.
So I think I would do it the same way that I've participated in a lot of these other committees. Sometimes, for example, with the design committees, the project like Dunkin' Donuts at Bolton Street, 2020 Bolton Street, the project, or for example, the one at Chestnut Hill, sorry, that Hancock Village, the project that we started with, I didn't like it. I thought it was not only ugly, but also sort of too big or too something. But that wasn't what we were there for. We were there to try to make it sort of look better for the community, work better for the community, and um, do an overall improvement of what was there. So even though I wasn't a fan of the project, I still worked with the architects and the community and the owners and everybody to do what we were supposed to do an improvement. So the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm sort of a very down to earth person in that ideology is not something that I think in the way I think. I can go either way as long as people sort of tell me, what you're saying makes sense. So I see both sides of the coin, um, and and that's how I've done a lot of my decision making. So that's why when people say, "Oh, you're for this or you're for that," they're having a hard time exactly figuring out why, because I've been on both sides of the aisle for since I started. So that's how I plan to continue. It's to listen to the community, and if it makes sense for the community overall to do something in that respect, and that's the way we should go. Even if it goes, even if I disagree with it personally, because it's not really my choice, it's the community's choice.
Do you have a website?
I do have a website. It's electcarlos.com. I
There it is. All
there.
right. So electcarlos.com. Uh, Folks, we just had a great conversation with Carlos Ridruejo running for select board. There are three candidates. There will be one winner, and you'll get one vote, and you'll get that vote on Tuesday, May 6th. Polls are open 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. There is early voting. There is vote by mail. I know you can use a search engine and figure out all of those details on your own. Of course, we'll have select board, library trustee, school committee, and in most precincts, competitive town meeting races. Your vote matters. In most precincts, only a few hundred people vote. You might not like who's running the nation. You might not like who your state rep is, but you have a choice in May on who's going to represent you at the local level. And I hope that you will get out and vote. Again, Carlos, thanks for coming on show, and thanks for being here on Brookline Interactive Group.
Thank you so much, and we do like our state rep.
Well, thank
Thank you,
you.
Tommy.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.